Welcome to Ellis B. Feaster's Radio Air Check and Classic TV channel.
Of the world, you are about to be entertained by the eighth, the young man who has become a legend in his own time. It's the Frankie Crocker Show.
Do it, Frankie. Do it to it.
Suck it to me, mama. Good evening, New York. This is the show that's bound to put more dips in your hips, more cut in your strut, and more glide in your stride. If you don't dig it, you know you've got a hole in your soul. And you don't eat chicken on Sunday. Tall, tan, young, and fly. Anytime you want me, baby, reach out for me. I'm your guy. Just as good to you as it is for you. You get so much with the Frankie Crocker touch. After all, how could you lose with the stuff I use? Tall and tender for the feminine gender. Anytime you want me, you got it. Ow! You know, they call me wax paper because I rap on anything. Call me aluminum foil because my rap is so strong. And when it gets good to them, they call me candy paper because the rap is definitely sweet. Suck it to me, mama. But be cool, young girl. Don't let your eyes and your ears get your mind so messed up your heart desires something your body just can't stand. Hello, New York.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to 98.7 KISS FM's tribute to the one and only Frankie Crocker. I'm Bob Slade, and it's my honor and privilege on behalf of the KISS family to host this tribute to a giant in our industry, Mr. Frankie Crocker, the chief rocker, Frankie Hollywood Crocker, fast Frankie Crocker. As all of you know, Frankie Crocker died last week at the age of 63. He lived, to be sure, a life that had great impact on people's lives and left an indelible mark on this business we call radio and radio programming. Tonight we're going to take a long look at Frankie Crocker and his career and his impact on you, the radio listener, and how, if I can say this, there will probably be no other one like him in our lifetime. He was a unique person, a complex person, and probably that complexity was the core reason he had so many fans and admirers. Over the next 2 hours, you're going to hear from a variety of people, friends and former colleagues of Frankie, talking about him and his impact on radio. You'll also hear from the man himself as we try to peel back the outer layer of this legend, so to speak, to reveal the real Frankie Crocker to you. So let's get started with this very special tribute to our very own, the world's own, Frankie Crocker. Now, before we roll, the music will feature on the broadcast are songs that Frankie Crocker introduced to New York audiences or helped make very, very successful. The Frankie Crocker legend begins in Buffalo, New York, and Buffalo back then had a history of breeding black broadcasters. Imhotep Gary Bird ought to know he, like Frankie Crocker, was from Buffalo.
The key person in our evolution, as far as the long lineup of DJ personalities from Buffalo, is Eddie O.J. Eddie O.J. is really the godfather of Buffalo black radio. He is the first black voice that the black community hears coming out of a radio. And his effect was devastating. It would have been powerful regardless, because he was the first black voice, but because of what he brought to the table, the style, the energy, and most of all, the community interaction. OJ was a community person. You'd hear this engine revving up at the end of his show. It was like a sound effect, and he'd be talking and, thanking folks and who've been listening and so forth and so on. And he'd say, I'll see you, about, 30 minutes, bye, baby. And when he'd say that, his voice would echo, and you'd hear this engine, driving off into the distance. And then, hey, an hour later, you saw him in the community. And you saw him close up, and he had all the elements of style that at that point had become synonymous with the successful black radio personality, which we had never seen. And the effect on all of us, and certainly Frankie being the first among the local black population to enter then the radio field, Frankie saw it close up. And obviously took some pages from the OJ book in his learning process, which ironically occurred in a very, very quick period of time. When Frankie came in, OJ was very close to leaving at that point. Sonny Jim Kelsey is the person who came in behind Eddie OJ and who trained Frankie. And the story that I remember coming in, because Frankie and I went to the same high school, but we're like different decades. But so I knew of Frankie, and I heard him, Frankie Crocker, you're a record rocker. He was coming with that. And I remember that when I came in, Frankie was gone, and I came in '64. So you figure Frankie was only there no more than a year, 2 years at the most. And they said, man, yeah, you remind us of Frankie. And I said, why? He said, he was fast, man. I mean, Frankie learned faster than anybody really pretty much in the history of the station as far as how fast he understood what was going on with radio, to the extent that I remember that the comment, and I filed this away being a young blood because I was like, yeah, I got to make sure that they don't look at me like this, you know what I'm saying? Because Frankie, the reputation Frankie had was, they said, the guy said, Sonny, I created a monster. That was the exact phrase. He said, I created a monster. Because Frankie, in no time, was actually critiquing the people who taught him about what they were doing. And the funniest thing that I heard was that two of the jocks, my mentor Hank Cameron and a couple of the other guys, Sonny Jim and others, who said, and the bad thing is that he's right most of the time.
That monster was on his way to New York City in 1965, but his image was self-manufactured.
One of the aspects of Frankie's story, which doesn't get handled often, is that Frankie in high school was not like a really like smooth, suave looking kind of guy. I mean, his yearbook pictures, you know, his ears are, you know, kind of thrust out, howdy doody style. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he had glasses or something, but there was something with the eyes, you know, whatnot. And so it wasn't, he was more like a nerd, if you will, in the photo. But Frankie transformed himself as a DJ. He saw what the concept was about, you know, the persona of the image, the car, the whole piece. So now in Buffalo, we didn't get a lot of that. He was in, he was out, radio-wise. The next thing we know, we're hearing in Buffalo about Frankie Crocker has become the Love Man. And we feel love. What is this Love Man thing? And of course, when I came down to New York in my junior, instead of going to my junior prom, my gift from my grandmother was to go to WWRL. I told her I didn't want the prom outfit. I didn't forget the money and all that. Just give me the money to get an airline ticket. I want to go to New York. And so I came to New York, went to the station, and man, Crocker walked in the radio station. I was sitting with Rocky G. And when Frankie walked in, I mean, he was decked, you know, head to toe. I mean, leather and, you know, some other stuff on, and had his briefcase and his piece, and sat down and started kicking his rap. And I remember that I was already into rap because I had had a tape of Jocko, and I was kind of aware that that was the thing that was going on. And when I saw Frankie do his piece, man, it just blew us away. You know, more cut in your strut, more glide in your stride, more dips in your hips, and don't eat chicken on Sunday, often imitated, never duplicated. The eighth wonder of the world, before me there was no, the whole piece, man. I'm like, oh man. I go back to New York, to Buffalo, and I kick, you know, my rap up, you know, up in gear, right? And something happened in that moment that made me understand two things. A, the power behind what Frankie was doing, and also an understanding of the relationship between talent and radio, and especially black talent and radio. And that was that I did a rap, my own creation, and it took off. Opened my show with it and closed with another one. Telephones ringing off the hook. I mean, people calling that rap was bad, man. I want to get it. And Jerry B, the late Jerry B, called me and said, he was Pete. He said, the general manager will speak to you. And I go to general manager's office. I'm thinking, hey, I've blown up. I'm about to get a raise and pay, and I'm about to get hooked up, man. This rap thing has put me up on the map. And the guy told me that if I ever did another rap on that radio station, I would not have a job. And now I'm thinking I'm getting a raise. I'm thinking he's about to tell me, hey, the response is so great, you know, we're going to do whatever. And I came out of the meeting, man, stunned. I'm 17 years old, you know. And when I came out and I talked to Jerry, and Jerry said, hey, man, they're afraid. What does that mean? So I started researching and looking across the country. And what I saw, this is middle 60s, was that there was a elimination of personality jocks across the country that was occurring, in black personality jocks. And in effect, it was based on the fact that many of these jocks who came out of what we'll call the Jocko school had their raps and had their whole personality pieces, and they had indeed become bigger. than the radio stations.
That's the monster we're talking about. But Frankie moved ahead anyway and created an image for himself in New York City on radio station WWRL. An image so strong that Lawrence High School student Leon Goodman was pulled in. He entered the Be a Disc Jockey for a Day contest at WWRL and won, and couldn't wait to get to the studio.
In those days when we were growing up, you know, Frankie was the disc jockey, not a disc jockey. He was the disc jockey. So I got to tell you how I was dressed to set the stage. And in the late 60s, we used to wear Bly sweaters. So I had on my pink Bly sweater, my pink pants, and my black pink silk socks with pink running through them. So I was clean. But anyway, so I walked in the studio. There were three of us that won, actually. I don't even know what happened to the other two people. It was a guy from Brooklyn, a girl from Brooklyn, and myself. And so when we got there, they, Barbara was the reception. She's still at RL. They told Frankie we were there. So when we came in, Frankie said, he brought us into the studio. He said, who wants to go first? So since I consider myself a gentleman, I said, why don't we let the lady go first? And the other guy said, no, I want to go first. So Frankie gave him his few minutes and put the girl on and gave her a few minutes. And I was the last one to go, and he kept me on for like 45 minutes. I was introducing the records, and to this day, I still remember what we were playing. So it was really cool.
No, you can. What was the first record?
Miriam Makiba's, Pata Pata. And he said, so what are you going to do when you graduate high school? And I said, I'm going to be the next Frankie Crocker. And he said, what happens if you don't make it? I said, well, I'm going to make it. I'm going to be the next Frankie Crocker. And then he said, well, what happens if you don't make it? And that always stuck with me. And I remember, and I know we're going to cut this short, but I remember after I did the show, it's like all the football players and the basketball players, they were all mad because I was suddenly the big man on campus. Not so much that I was at the radio station, but I was at the radio station with Frankie Crocker.
Leon Goodman is now an executive with Sesame Street. Now, Goodman may have been impressed, but as Frankie Crocker tells it, his mother did not like the new Frankie.
My mother really wanted an attorney, and she wanted me to do that. And when I came to New York, it was like on the idea that if I did this, if I didn't make it, then I was to go back to school. And when she finally came to New York to see and hear me, I was doing that, the kind of thing that I'm going to do in the intro. At the time, we had coined the phrase, "Sock it to me, mama," which was later taken by I guess the media and used on a program, a TV program, and they just turned it down to sock it to me. And I used to do things, and it was very suggestive. It was a double entendre, so to speak. It means that it could be risque or it could not, depending upon where the person who listened to it, where their head was at. And obviously, and I guess unfortunately, my mother took it the wrong way, and she thought it was horrible, and she stopped speaking to me. And that was bad because she said she'd worked so hard to bring me up, and that I would wind up doing something like that. I think it happens with a lot of children and parents when a child wants to do something that he really feels he wants to do, and the parents want him to do something else. But I guess later she found out that I was pretty good at what I was going to do, and I was going to have a future in it. And plus that and the mink coat that I bought her for Christmas helped out a little bit. And I remember when I gave her a mink coat, and she'd never had a mink coat before. And I remember it was, I can't remember the coat today, a white cerulean mink that I bought her, cerulean mink I think it was, and I bought her, and when I gave it to her, she looked at me with a little water in her eyes, and she said, "Sock it to me, son." And it was a good Christmas. So, and after that, she's been my #1 booster. And you know, like, I guess you can't say anything to anyone's mother about their child, and that's the kind of mother I have.
By 1968, it was time for Frankie Crocker to spread his wings. In those days, the only black disc jockey on white radio was Chuck Leonard at WABC. Frankie Crocker became the second when he moved to WMCA, the good guys station.
I think, in all honesty, the reason I left was to broaden my scope and about $30,000 more. And that is the truth. I can't tell you. I do this for a living, and I expect to be paid for it. I don't think that I backstep when I'm working hard, and I think that that's the only way you can do it. I left because of that. I thought that at the time, at that time, that I was worth more. I have no animosity toward the radio station. I might work with those people again. You never know. We're all in the same business. But at the time, I was just offered a better position and a chance to get on a broader audience and more money, so I did it.
WMCA.
You gotta be kidding. Gentlemen, your radio is about to be turned on. This is Fast Frankie Crocker. The movement. Frankie Crocker isn't on your radio really isn't on. This is Rapid Fire Radio.
Do it, Frankie. Do it.
That brings back memories. Soul Makossa by Manu Dibango, one of many songs Frankie Crocker would discover and play on the radio when he became program director at WLIB WBLS-FM. When WMCA decided to end its format for playing hit records on the radio, Frankie Crocker was out of a job, but not for long. He landed a job as air personality and program director at WLIB-FM. Here's Imhotep Gary Bird.
Frankie came up out of this personality era with an understanding that you had to be an entertainer between the records. And I think that gave him a great edge at the point that he moved into the FM experience, which was the way that it was being played then, as you know, more laid back kind of presentation. So we went from fast Frankie Crocker to the laid back, Frankie Crocker, who ultimately became, of course, Frankie Hollywood Crocker and the Chief Rocker and Black Satin and all the other personas that he worked with in his imaging. And he was very conscious of these different imaging platforms and phases. Time to change, time to come up with something new, time to ride a new trend. And he very deliberately did those things. And I think that in the case of the point at which he came to WLIB FM, I believe he had something going for him technologically and creatively that was happening in music that gave him, I think, the most dramatic edge. And the way I've put it very simply is, What's Going On is an album that's going to sound great however you hear it. But there is a distinct difference hearing it on AM and hearing it on FM. It was an album that was literally made for FM and for the new sonic capabilities of hearing stereo and whatnot. And you then wound up with a series of album-oriented artists leading right up and through Stevie and so forth, who were creating music that was taking advantage of these acoustical dimensions that ultimately FM was able to provide at a level that AM could not compete with. And when you added Frankie's own power and persona to that mix, and then an opening up of the, quote, total black experience and sound that began to bring music in from genres that weren't being exposed via, quote-unquote, commercial black radio. It had the makings of something that was going to explode, and it did. Right in front of our eyes, it exploded.
Jungle Fever by Chakakis, a prime example of Frankie Crocker picking the hits. He had this on the air 3 months before the pop stations played it. A total black experience and sound was born. To set up his program, Frankie needed personnel. One of the first hired in October of 1971 was G. Keith Alexander.
I actually started working for Frankie at the very beginning. He had been hired at WLIB-FM. He had just left MCA, and LIB-FM was had just started playing a little jazz with Ed Williams, and Ed Williams was there at the time, and Frankie became program director, and he decided that he wanted to change this whole station to something a little bit more total black experience. And a guy named Rocky G, I was at Fordham University at Lincoln Center at the time, and I was on my way to the bank, and I ran into this part-time disc jockey who worked in New Jersey. I can't remember his name right now. And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going to the bank before it closes." And he said, "Well, why don't you come go with me? I'm going up to a record company." So I said, "Oh, okay." And I went to this record company, and at the time, I was on WHBI. I had a little radio show every Tuesday morning from 5:15 to 5:30. And I gave the man $20 for me to be on the air every Tuesday morning, just long enough for me to say hello, play 3 records, and say goodbye. So when the guy took me up to the record company, he introduced me to this guy named Rocky G, who was a record executive. So I asked Rocky if he'd buy time on my radio show, and not knowing that my radio show really didn't mean anything because it was like, 15 minutes and no one knew of it. And he said, "Sure, kid." He said, "Let me think about it. Let me think about it." So I went in the other room to make a phone call, and I overhear Rocky talking to this part-time disc jockey from New Jersey saying, Frankie Crocker just started a radio station up there, uptown, and he's looking for disc jockeys. And I came running out, and I heard the guy as I'm running out say, "Hey, I'd like to be in big time radio with Frankie." And so as I heard the guys make this statement, I come running out and I said, "Hey, Rocky, I'd like to be in big time radio too." Well, Rocky immediately picked up the telephone.
It was, of course, Frankie's show, and he was a perfectionist on the air, and he desired that from others. With Morning Man and Kenny Webb, he added female voices to his roster, not 1, but 2, Vi Higginson and Lamar Renee. And Vi Higginson talks about how she got to the new radio station, WLIB, WBLS.
Part of the reason that I went to WLIB-FM because I was at a party. And at this party, I overheard some people talking about this new radio station and this young program director who was putting a new format into place. And I had gone to broadcasting school, and I had a tape. And this tape was Vi Higginson with Vibrations for New York. And the whole thing about this tape was that this was going to be for women. It was going to be beauty and fashion, which is where I came out of. I went to the Fashion Institute of Technology, and I had learned a great deal, and I was all anxious to share it with other black women. So I created this tape, a demo tape, and I went up to this radio station at the time that Frankie was on the air from 4 to 8, and I sat in the lobby and said, "I'm here to see Frankie Crocker." They went inside and said, "There's a lady waiting for you," and he didn't come out. So I waited until his shift was over, and he came out, and he says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I have a tape I'd like you to listen to. I'd like to do a show for women." He said, "You must be crazy. You just walk in here like this, talking about you want me to listen to a tape?" Well, I said, "I understand you're doing something new. Maybe this is a place you could do it." I said, "Would you please listen to it?" He went inside the studio right then and there. He listened to the tape. He came out, and he said, "I'd like to hire you." He hired me on the spot. And I said, "Hire me for what?" He said, "I want you to be on the air. I want you to be a disc jockey from 12 to 4. I said, "I don't want to be no disc jockey. I don't know how to be a disc jockey. I'm not here to be a disc jockey. I just want to do this show for women. And I have guests, and I have names of people and stuff that I want to do." He said, "Are you telling me no? You don't want to be a disc jockey?" I said, "Yes, I don't know anything about this." He said, "Okay, give me your telephone number." I gave him my telephone number. And a couple of days later, I get a telephone call from Dick Novak, who is the general manager of the station, the son of the owner. And he says, "I understand that Frankie Crocker heard something on your tape, and I need to talk to you about it. Would you be willing to come and talk to us?" I went in, and I sat down, and he says, "What do you mean you don't want to be a disc jockey?" I said, "That's not part of my life plan. I didn't imagine being a disc jockey." So then he said, I think you should consider taking this job, and I want you to go home and think about it. You will work 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. You will earn $125 a week." I said, $125 a week? What are you talking about? Anyway, I went home and I talked it over with my sister. I said, "Listen, these guys are telling me I got to take a job to be on the radio. What do you think about that?" She said, "Listen, if you don't like it, you can always quit." "Oh," I said, "I never thought about that." I called him up. I said, "I'll take the job." And I took the job in a very small studio. It was in the back. It was LIB, AM, and FM. And Frankie was really very persuasive in that regard. He knew that this is something that he wanted. Why? I wasn't sure at the time. And he taught me. I said, "I'm scared." He said, "What are you scared of?" And he said, "I'm afraid that maybe the women might not like me. They're not used to hearing a woman on the air." But that didn't happen. That fear did not happen. And as time went by, they gave us cold copy. It was baptismal by fire. You had to do it. But the best part of the gig that I liked was there was all these albums in the room. And you could actually pick up the album and play the cut on the album that you wanted to hear. And that was fabulous for me because you could create a mood. And he allowed you to create, he gave you room to create that mood based on what you felt like hearing that day. And I loved it because it was black. It was the total black experience and sound. I can still hear it say, a different shade of black, gospel, a different shade of black, Latin. You know, and it was that kind of music, that variety of music that we were able to include in that format. And you learned by doing, and you learned the hard way. I can remember reading news for the first time. Boy, oh boy. But you know, there's nothing like that kind of on-the-job training. And so I will forever be grateful to Frankie Crocker because one of his strongest points is he could recognize talent. Even talent that maybe you didn't even know you had. And was able to draw that out. So I was very grateful to him. I got a complete education by working with Frankie Crocker.
And from 1971 through 1974, Frankie Crocker and his crew of new disc jockeys started to become the voice of black music in New York. If you didn't hear it on Frankie's show, it wasn't a hit.
The radio is not what leads a community. I think the people are what it is. Radio is like TV. It's only a mirror of what the culture is. I don't have a choice sometimes in playing. I do have a choice. I can not play it, but it would be a bad choice if a record like Rod Stewart's comes through. I mean, I can't say that because he happens to be white, I'm not going to play it because a lot of blacks are the ones that like the record. Stevie Wonder is not only liked by black people, he's liked by white as well, so I can't just say, hey, you can't listen to this. So I think what will happen with radio and what I'll be doing is, like I said before, I'll just be reflecting what's happening in the community in New York or around the country. If that's what you want to hear and that's what you like, I guess that's what I'll play. I'll try to play the best of that music that I can.
Now, Frankie was also big on recognizing trends. Disco was one of those trends, and Doctor's Orders was one of those records he exposed first.
Hi, honey, it's me. I went to see the doctor today, 'cause ever since you've been gone, I had a pain deep down inside. Because only you can cure me since
Donna Summer's Love to Love You Baby, another hit, broken by Frankie Crocker at late 1975, early 1976. Here's Imhotep Gary Bird.
He wasn't afraid of his ears. And I think that has a lot of power in relationship to what we see going on now with so much processing of decision-making matrices to figure out what record to play. Frankie trusted his ears and his instincts. And I think when you look back at that period of time, that really gave him another edge on programmers because he wasn't waiting for the record to be proven in some other region and to get a bullet away. It was like he gave it his own bullet. He gave it his own stamp. And really, that's very much in connection with the legacy of the great black radio DJs of decades past who, in effect, were playing their own music, finding great songs by great artists and promoting them and kicking it on the air as a find, you know, a discovery and so forth. I think Frankie kept that particular aspect alive. And I think it's like, okay, we know we all got 10 fingers, right? So let's just say that hypothetically that a jock has 10 component elements that are a part of what can make him effective in the community. And that one of those has to be selecting great new music. Okay? Frankie had a grasp of those tentacles of the DJ at a very high level, and the recognition of the power of being able to hear music and play it before other people. as being something that would attract listeners to his radio station. And man, it seems so simple, you know what I mean? It's like, it ain't brain surgery, but it is when everybody else is operating as if they don't have a brain.
But with success comes recognition, and with recognition comes the spotlight. And the spotlight was placed on Frankie and the power of his radio station, perhaps a little too brightly. That story, when our tribute to Frankie Crocker continues here on R&B Hits 98.7 KISS FM.